Hello, hello, and good morning-ish. Yeah, it's still morning. 09:13. Way late. I've been out for a few days. Lots of blood tests and X-rays and medical tests. Yeah, still, dealing with constant pain. It's just become the cosmic background radiation of my life for the past, say, 5 years. But that's okay. I don't mean to complain, just giving kind of a status, but that's why I was not around for a while. Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's interesting. I'm still using the little uh, anime girl avatar that was created on ChatGPT. I did it just to feed in. I don't plan on using it for long, but I just planned, or excuse me, I just sorry, that's the pain. Uh, I just used it as an experiment because I wanted to see what would happen if I prompted for anime girl, and I think I cat ears, so Neko style and rainbow hair, and this is one of the things it came up with. I've tried it a couple of times, and it all kind of comes up with the uh, same kind of character. I mean, granted, I'm feeding in anime, so I think that's it. I noticed the dichromism in the eyes. It seems like asymmetry in the eyes is something people do. They'll have different blink rates for the eyes. It seems to be the style or a very prominent style. Excuse me. So it's just kind of just to see how things work. I loaded it into a fairly low weight, very low weight PNG tubing piece of software. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. It looks kind of like a goat or something in the icon. Vadio tube, like VEADO tube, mini. So it seems pretty primitive. I mean, for the speech part, it just works basically off a threshold, so sort of like a noise gate to swap the which image it's using for closed mouth or open mouth. I would assume that the next level up, and it seems kind of a no-brainer, instead of going to trying to optically track a mouse or anything, is just to add uh, a few different mouth shapes. And honestly, at this level, I think the first step would be maybe even by time, or use that same level detection just to look for momentary dips at syllables, and just change the mouth shape for syllable. Wouldn't even have to match what the syllable actually is. I think that would be the next level, is maybe run just like a little filter to look for formants, to get mouth shapes. Just get your vowel mouth shapes, possibly something like that, 3 or 4, and I think that would probably be good. You look at especially the old cutout South Park. When they would move their mouths, it wouldn't just be open and closed. Um, but you could even, I suppose, just wag between. Like right now, if I just talk, this mouth stays open. You could even just wag between the mouth open and closed. Occasionally close the mouth, maybe at little intervals where um, the syllables go. Or even actually the most primitive, I think, would be just put it on a time cycle, maybe a semi-random time cycle, so that if someone keeps talking, it just moves a little bit. Which I think is honestly, what the wiggle, whatever they call the quaking, the wiggle motion is doing. It's visually giving that same sort of impression, just by moving the picture around to give some animation to when you're talking. I'm talking in a legato fashion right now to make it happen, where the mouth just stays open, but that wiggle gives a sense that there is motion in the talk. I always wanted to learn tube and throat singing. That'd be fun. Which is not what I'm doing. Um, but yeah, so I'll continue to play with it. This is all me just playing with the new stuff, just to learn about modern communication styles. I feel pretty brain rotted at times, but then I realize maybe some of it's the pain and the eyes, as as my glasses. I realized that I think years ago. It's like I was reading less. I'd still read short form stuff, but I was reading books less. And it's like, hey, I think it's the glasses, and it really is to some extent. I still like paper books, but electronic books are nice because I can change the font. But I'm certainly not the only one with that problem. I do enjoy audiobooks and audio dramas. I always have. So that's nothing new. But I would like to get back to reading. I think my concentration, I think the brain rot that everybody talks about, I think my concentration is low. My attention span is low. I used to have a very long attention span. Uh, but that is less so these days. I don't want to attribute it to medical issues. It's fun too, because then it gives me an excuse, but I don't think that's all of it. So I think I'll endeavor to try to put aside distraction-free reading every day. And it's not just internet distractions; it's daily life. Somebody needs some help. There's a chore to do. A dog needs something. Stuff like that. Excuse me. I did, kind of spend time. Always seems like I'm kind of in operations mode, admin and operations, where it allows me to take care of some details and minutia to clear the lane for a performer to go out there and do something. And I'd like to support role, running kind of domestique or a roller in bikes, which is always kind of a poo-poo thing. But they could always send me out, and I could jack up the pace to burn people out. Now, I was not going to be able to sprint after that, but that was our plan, and it was always a good plan because I tended to be slow twitch and a very high mileage rider, and could bring up the pace and just kind of burn people out, and got pretty good at the tactics. Yeah, I've done a little track riding, and that's all fast twitch, and especially being older, that's a funny one for me. But it's track riding is really cool, it really is, and there's a lot going on strategy wise, which it seems like it wouldn't. Oh, there's an interesting game, Flamme Rouge, the Red Flame, basically, uh, which is a little bike racing game on a board game. Uh, but surprisingly, it's very simple rules, but it does a little bit capture the sense of riding in a peloton and uh, chipping around, and how when you decide your burn rates, knowing your burn rates, and drafting, and when to attack, and when to try to close the distance, and all those kinds of things. It's a very interesting little game. It's very cute. But to a large extent, that is a former life. But I've had former lives before, one of which is on the screen, I suppose. I used to be a classic guitarist. A lot of, I think people, classic guitarists, we kind of use because classical, still use classical guitarist. But I like classic is a good separator, because classical is also a period of music, but a lot of times I would like to play Baroque period music, a little bit of a Bach, I suppose, and a lot of that's written for other instruments. And old man Bach, J.S. Bach, was uh, sort of notorious for being an organist and stuff, and really explored the structure music, uh, writing pieces sort of independent of the instrument, including the voice. Some of the vocal stuff is brutal in terms of where do I breathe, but he was, working on the musical structure. So while, it was playing some music on guitar was adaptive, uh, by all means, uh, it, that was a nice challenge too. It still got how to manage that, how to have the music and manage the limits of whatever instrument you're using. And the Rick Foster transcriptions were brutal, because he tried it, and it's right in the front of his books. It's like didn't didn't make that many concessions. Tried very hard not to make a lot of concessions. So there's some stuff in there that's just brutal, like Cantata 308. The sheep may safely graze has crossbar fretting, or cross fret bars rather, like you're doing a bar chord if anybody plays guitar, but you're actually going across two different frets. and while the other fingers are still doing crazy stuff. Very challenging work. Very challenging work. Maybe I'll get back to it. Do I think I've got some neuropathy? I actually started using baodang balls, the Chinese, the balls, but I switched to actually highly polished industrial ball bearings because these metal ones aren't hollow and they don't have the chimes in them like you see some of those baodang balls have. So they, I think they perform more exercise. You can hear them clacking there, as I described it there, which is not really what I should be doing. But again, it's a process, working on it. But they're significantly heavier. I think they're a pound a piece or something. Not enough to damage me. It's like that's wouldn't go that far for sure. But they're soothing. Once if I go back to stone ones, they just feel so light. Excuse me. But again, a former life. But part of that former life was what you see on the screen there. Roland VG99. Being a classical guitarist, and I think it ties in then. I'm going to say classical just for people's comfort instead of classic guitarist, I suppose. But being from that tradition, there was a lot of precision in terms of having the guitar perform very polyphonically, where each string is its own little voice, as opposed to a chord being sometimes you hear homophonic, where a chord, say, is a single big voice, and you're almost reading, like if you read the music sort of vertically and all the notes in one time slice are this one big voice. Well, a lot of times in like counterpoint, Baroque type stuff, it's written for four, human. A lot of it's written for four human voices, soprano and alto and tenor and baritone and all that, where the individual notes in a chord, basically it's singers singing a melody. They only have a single voice, so it's but a single note melodies, and each voice doing their melody will intersect with the others in time. You cut vertically on the time again. You cut a time slice out, and they just so happen by plan, but they just so happen to produce a chord, a harmony, and so that's kind of how that works. It's a neat trick where the individual voices are making harmonies, and that's really in uni, that's your first, that's music theory at the beginning. Is traditionally they kind of cover 4-part harmony, and there are, when they say rules, you get graded on the rules. That's it's not like you can't do something, but the idea behind the rules is they're guidelines or ways of getting. I would describe it as that sort of counterpoint. I would describe it as to make dense harmonic, or maybe dense or interesting harmonic things happen utilizing melodic voices. Maybe it would be a good way to describe it. Is so those rules are just guidelines to structure a framework of some sort to aid in that. It's not like you can't do something else by any stretch, especially in a composition. But sometimes you'll have a little exercise. Harmonize this CF, cantus firmus, which is usually the upper voice. It's like, there's a melody, harmonize this melody, and make it harmonically interesting. Yeah, and the subtext is making it harmonically interesting, and all the other voices, the other three voices usually in this type of exercise, make them so they have some sort of melodic cohesion. Often they're not the best melodies, but they don't jump around sort of semi-randomly, where the singer can't be like, oh, there's no, I'm just singing notes that are going everywhere. They do da 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 da. They'll go, in kind of a smooth line. So moving to guitar with that, that kind of guitar, we play finger style. The right hand is individually plucking notes, and the notes sort of ring out individually, and they often have different time values from one another because they're sort of distinct voices. And it's actually one of the beauty, I think, of guitar is that they're distinct voices, but you're also very limited into how many parts you can do, with your hands, because your hand only has a certain amount of span, and you have to kind of trigger notes and get back to them with your right hand. You don't pluck the notes, and so there's a limited amount of harmony you can do, which is actually very nice because it does add a certain cohesion to it. You are a single player with a single brain. And, if you want to play in a quartet or something, then, you're back to kind of that 4-part harmony, like singers. But, as a solo or even in a duets are beautiful. You get a limit to the amount of polyphony and harmony, that you can actually execute, which is a nice constraint because it keeps you kind of on a track. But I think that leads into, especially playing music adapted from other instruments. Not that there wasn't a lot of stuff written for guitar. There certainly was. Soren, Awato, and Carulli and Carcassi and all these guys. But a lot of it wasn't. And, sometimes you hear a lot of times guitar players, I think especially guitar players into effects like that. I want to play guitar, but make it not sound like a guitar, which is a valid thing to do. I've got, being through the ringer, I've got thoughts on that, both plus and minus, in terms of extend the palette, but also don't try to be what it isn't, is another theory with that. But what's on the screen there is a Roland VG99, which is an electronic guitar processor and synthesizer. But yeah, so I've had a history with guitar synthesizers for 30 or so years, maybe more, 30 more, yeah, somewhere around. No, more than that. A little more than that, not tons. Yeah, maybe. Sorry, that's the pain. But I started with the Ibanez made a guitar using had a strange little guitar and a rack mount controller that would try to read the notes and then feed it to it didn't have sounds inside, but it would feed it to a synthesizer through MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, which would assign note name or note numbers and levels, like this, the middle C is this note, is 122 or whatever it is, it's and just assign, they were 0 to 256, so it'd assign note numbers and send that to a synthesizer. And there were ways to handle bends and things through continuous controller, which is another 0 to 256 number. It's so an 8-bit, but like a pitch bend wheel. But the guitar was actually a pretty nice guitar. I think it was an Ashbot. It was really heavy to be really stable, and it had this big chunky bridge with big fine tuners on the back, which were the only tuners on it. It was a headless design, so they were kind of extended range. But at the time, because the electronics were so primitive in terms of trying to derive the note, they wanted to feed the electronics an ultra stable system, an ultra stable signal. So, the guitars, they tried to make it very in tune and very even, so the electronics knew what to expect. That was the idea behind probably the Roland 707 guitar, is the one everybody's kind of sees from the 80s, with that extra little crossbar or extra little stabilizer bar over the neck, which I should put up a picture of that, which was sort of the definitive guitar of the time. But the electronics were very primitive. At that time, it was pitched to MIDI, like that's get the pitch, assign it a number, and feed it to a synthesizer by musical instrument digital interface. We also called it pitch to glitch because it was really primitive. And what it would try to do is, filter, take a signal, filter it out, and then it was usually doing something like counting what's called zero crosses. Wherever the wave crosses zero, you kind of know that's half the wavelength, or sometimes count peaks and valleys, that kind of thing, as opposed to there's a fast Fourier analysis you can do, which is more mathy. But these were primitive, and processing power was limited, so they were sort of just trying to count the peaks and valleys more or less, which created some problems like pick attack. When you pluck a guitar string, be it with a pick or a finger, that initial amount of energy isn't really at the attuned to the note you're trying to play. It isn't. It's just a excursion, pulling the string and letting it go, and it takes a minute for that little impact for that string to die down to its note. You're creating the string has a resonant frequency based on the length. As you put your finger on it, it changes the length of that string, and that changes the resonant frequencies. But it takes a few milliseconds for that to settle down into that, as it's reacting to a pluck. And the problem is the computer, the electronics trying to identify the note, would get real squirrely with that initial noise attack noise, and it couldn't find the note, and sometimes it would burble, and it would just kind of do its best and find random notes. The other way you can try to deal with it, which can be a problem, is, well, just don't and delay the signal and delay the note of identification, the note extraction, the pitch extraction sometimes it's called, and just wait and do it after you think it's probably settled down. But that creates this weird tracking delay, it's called, where you can you play a note and it's not immediate. It feels like a ghost, like somebody else is playing it. So there's certain techniques and things you do, and you expect it to behave, to get that feedback of, well, I played the note, and let me hear the note, and it doesn't happen. And there's, to some extent, if you make these pads that kind of wash in, that can be okay, but it still feels sort of off-putting, especially to a guitar player. And that's the funny thing about saying, well, I don't want it to sound like a guitar, but then you still wind up playing it like a guitar. And rock guitarists, I think, have more problems with that because they are used to that immediate thing, and there's a lot of incidental sounds, damped notes, and chicks and pings, and they play the noise a lot. It's just part of the sound of a rock guitar, or popular music type guitar. So they had much more problems with that, I think, because the playing style is still that. Or if you make these very harmonically dense timbres, they have a lot of complex sounds. Playing big old chords, it doesn't sound very good because it just creates it's like putting too much watercolor paint on, and it all just turns into kind of this brown, sort of like that. So those were the problems with that pitch to glitch, and it was both the player's expectations and the mechanics of the machine. Certain things you could also do is some people would mix in a little bit of dry guitar just to have that initial attack be handled by the actual physical guitar, and excuse me, and then when the synthesized sound would come in, it would take over, which is fine because it's actually a very small time slice where that happens, and it just gives the ear something to grab onto, and it keeps you in time, and it's part of the sound, but when it's not the major part of the character of the sound. So that was a way of doing it, and before that, before the pitch glitch, like that was my first one, but there were guitar synthesizers before that one, like the venerable GR300. I had one of those, and it was barely a synthesizer. It was an analog system, and what it would basically do is use a tracking oscillator that I don't want to get too deep into the details, but it would sort of try to synchronize itself with the wave of the guitar. Because it was an oscillator, though, it would have its own little wave shape, which defines the timbre, the character of the sound. And so the interesting thing about that, when it heard the pick noise, is it would just be a little bit of pick noisy in its own little oscillations. So it sounded pretty natural, and it wasn't trying to extract the pitch. Also at the end of a note, as a note dies away, and the signal would get really weak. Sometimes the pitch extraction when it's trying to identify the pitch, it wouldn't be loud enough to cross its trigger points, and so it'd start burbling out. making sort of semi-random notes. But the GR300 didn't really have that problem. It wasn't trying to extract a pitch, but it would also track bends and things like that very easily because it wasn't assigning a note name to it and then trying to go like, oh, well, you've raised and lowered that by a little bit. It just did whatever the string did. So it was, in a way, it was barely a synth because those were the oscillators, and then you feed it into an amplifier, a voltage controlled amplifier. What you can do is with what's called an envelope generator, where I'm going to take this sound, but I'm going to change its volume, like taking a volume knob and maybe swelling it or something over time, which is a big component of the sound. Like wow, versus a boom. There's all these different envelopes that can happen. Some notes, some instruments kind of fade in. Others are very immediate and die off very quickly. Banjos die off very quickly, that kind of thing. So you could impress that upon that. Well, that was more of an effect. It wasn't really that's part of a classic analog synthesizer, like a Moog, like a mini Moog, or sequential Pro One is typically an oscillator, which creates the voice. This creates the basic tone, and an amplifier, which changes the volume envelope, how it comes in and how it rises and falls in intensity of sound and volume of sound, basically. And then a filter, which was, will usually in these types of systems, there'd be a low-pass filter, which will filter out, it will change the tone by filtering out high frequencies, so things will sort of go from crisp to round. Which is part of a natural element. Not that all have to do it, but like a flute, for instance, is actually a very round sound. It's almost a pure sine wave, which is a very simple thing without a bunch of overtones. But all sounds can be broken down into a series of sine waves of varying frequencies. But it sort of a very mellow, sort of even sound, and the sine wave is sort of the basic sound, and then you add extra little wiggles into that sine wave to make different shapes, they're higher frequency wiggles, so they're called overtones. A high pass filter is kind of very traditional in this. And then physically, a lot of things when you strike it, very much like the pick attack, there'll be these overtones, all these little high frequency things. So if you filter those out, it'll get rounder, more even. So as a sound decays, as a sound dies away, often you'll have a very rich sound. And then as the energy dissipates from, say, a pluck or what have you, or somebody's kind of settling down and running their voice down, not putting so much air into their vocal tract, it'll get mellower, and you'll get less high overtones, and that will die off. Or you can just filter it. Something might have a violin, say, especially very scratchy sound, or something sizzly like a cymbal may have a lot of overtones, but you can just take those out with the high pass filter, which is just filtering out all the extra little high sound energies. So the GR300 had that very primitive oscillator, and then it basically had a filter and a voltage controlled amplifier, which are more of just modifications. You could even just plug a guitar draw in to a filter and a amplifier, and we'd actually do that quite a bit to create very synth-alike sounds. That was one of the old tricks, especially if it was real glitchy, I just can't get it. For instance, the GR300 actually was on board the guitar, oddly enough, but had distortion, hexaphonic distortion built in, which is just takes the sound of a guitar and makes it real fuzzy, is I think the best way to describe it. It adds a whole bunch of high frequency information. So it gave the the filter something to bite onto, and so you had more range. By having a lot of high frequency energy in there, you could sculpt it. It gave a very interesting complex wave that you could sculpt with the filter to make it mellower or sharper, and then the amplifier you could feed you could put it through that. So you give it a envelope that slowly comes up or comes up fast and dies away fast, or whatever it is you wanted to do, like to make something backwards sounding, have it rise slowly and sound, and then stop abruptly, and because that's kind of opposite what we're used to hearing, and so it sounds sort of backwards. Because we're used to have sharp attacks often, and then it sounds slowly dying away. So it was barely a synthesizer, and that's fair. It's actually, I think it allows a lot of nuance to come through. And as time went on, and we had the GR300, and then Roland made the GR700, which was pitch to glitch, pitch to MIDI, which was more similar to ish. I don't want to belabor the point if we use MIDI inside or not, but more similar to what I was first using. And then, they kept going along that with the GR series, but they also brought out the VG series, virtual guitar, and it was almost a relative of the GR300. Oh, by the way, I digress. Next to the GR300, there was a more budget-friendly GR100, which was just I think it might have had an octave divider in it, but it had basically the hex fuzz and the filter in the amp, but didn't actually have any oscillators in it. So it was an electronic guitar, I think they sold it as, instead of a guitar synthesizer. And that was just sort of effects applied to a guitar. But the one key difference is it would apply the effects to each individual string. So that's hex for six, hexaphonic processing, 6-voice processing, they would call it. And when, synthesizers kind of always had that problem with the pitch identification, through the GRs. They got much, much, much better. But they started coming out with the VG series of guitars, the virtual guitar, and it had kind of two sections. It had HRM, harmonic restructure modeling. It's a fancy name for basically it was doing excuse me, kind of the same idea as the GR100. You know what? Instead of trying to synthesize things, we're just going to take the guitar signal or each individual string and process them differently. We'll mess with the number of overtones to make to find the character or timbre of the sound. Is I have a lot of high-end information that makes it sizzly or sharper or mellower and these kinds of things. And then we'll feed it through various effects, the filters and an amplifier which is basically the level control, and we'll control how those change over time, and we'll get very synthy-like sounds, not guitar sounds. And the other part of it, the VG, the virtual guitar, is we'll take each individual string and do some advanced filtering and things, model some resonances to try to make different guitars. We can take your guitar and make it sound a little more like if you're playing a Fender Stratocaster, we'll make it sound a little more like a Les Paul, and these kinds of things. While I've had the VG8 and the VG99, the virtual guitar systems, I never really cared for the modeling so much. I used it more as the synthesizer. And in the VG99, they actually went ahead and it's like, you know what, we'll go ahead and we'll put the pitch identifying parts in there too. It doesn't have a synthesizer engine, but we'll put the pitch extraction so it can do pitch to MIDI. So you've got the effect system and the guitar modeling part, and which is the part that we'll use effects to make it not sound unnatural, but try to make it sound like a different brand of guitar or like a 12-string guitar, these kinds of things. You can even do pitch shifting. Make it like a little tiny guitar that's at a higher pitch. So they included both of those with the MIDI capability. You did have to use either a special guitar like I had or what's called a hexaphonic pickup. It's just a pickup with 6 individual pickups, which are microphones for strings, basically. 6 little individual microphones that pick up each string individually so they can be individually processed. And you'd have these big cables you'd plug in. The early ones were 24-pin cables. Not all of them were connected, to be honest. Then they moved to a 13-pin cable. So, first you had this big old power cable looking thing, like a printer, like an old printer cable. that kind of thing plugged in, and the cables are really expensive. Now they use the 13 pin, and I guess the newest version they're now doing taking the individual strings and doing some of the. I guess they're multiplexing it, but they're shooting it down now a single digital line, I believe. So I think it's digital within the actual pickup unit. Not sure, but there's some things you can do to multiplex a signal, which is where you take a bunch of different signals and put them down the same line. uh, wow, I've been talking at that for about 30. Hey, I guess I'm interested in this stuff. So I've had my time with that, and for a classic guitar player where we tend to play more cleanly, these kind of systems actually worked easier for us, better for us, because it was just more native to our style. So even the pitch to glitch stuff I could make work reasonably well. Still, there's many frustrations. But the Roland's been the one that has really kept that alive. There's certainly some others, but Roland's the kind of created the standard. Other manufacturers will even use the old 13-pin standard, and the Roland standard, so you can interface with Roland gear. But I might be a little bit at a twilight with that. I don't really play guitar much anymore, and again, I think there's some neuropathy. Maybe I'll pick it up again. But to some extent, I kind of like to let the sound be what it is, or do things through just various effects, which was always part of that game, but lightening up on that a little bit. So just doing some basic modifications to get a different sound out of it. And I have to admit, I have trouble resonating with all the menus and options and features in the VG99. It's just a lot. Like, if you notice, I even have, that's actually my unit right there, and it's set to the GR300 patch, which is that barely a synthesizer that I was talking about. So I suppose and this isn't to say that they're not good or poo-poo anybody else's journey with it, and I'm not giving up on it wholesale, except for the fact that I think with some neuropathy, my playing is kind of not there anymore, and it really hasn't been for quite a while. It may be the twilight for me, but not for other people. I do wish they would make a more simple, almost like the GR300, since it was so primitive. It was pretty much a WYSIWYG. You had some knobs on the front, and what you see is what you get with the knobs. Not a lot of presets, no menus. And it would be nice to see them almost go back to that. I know internally you can do this, with all the things, but it would be kind of neat just to have your basic timbre section of VCO, or if you want to do hexaphonic fuzz, or even an octave divider or something, where that can give you kind of some more richness to the voice, which I didn't really get into. But some things just to make sort of a rich timbre, and then a filter to adjust that timbre over time, or to sculpt the tone, and then a VCA to change the volume envelope, that intensity envelope, to decide how the note comes in, attacks, and how it decays, dies away. And that would be a neat. That would be a place that I think I could find home. But I grew up on those kind of earlier synthesizers where that's before the memory, and like a Sequential Circuits Pro 1 was my first synth, and that was just what was on the panel is what you did, and it was a streamlined workflow. It just it's something I can deal with when if I play with the menus and stuff, I'm not playing it, and sometimes it just got in the way, and that's for me. Other people can handle that, and I think I had my time with menus. My second synth was a Casio CZ101, really interesting envelope structure, but it was all menu diving, and it was buttons. You didn't even have a jog wheel. So that was that period in my life when I was exploring synthesis very early on, and so a lot of it wasn't performance. It was experimenting with the sound. and just learning about how to make sounds and really seeing what it could do. Um, wow. Well, that is my little 40-minute ramble on guitar synth. uh, Highly unstructured and not particularly informative. Jones, I think it's .com. It's like Jones, the name Joness, two S's on it. I think he just probably did that. Is a really neat resource. That guy restores old synthesizers and is a font of knowledge for that. So if you are interested in that, I would definitely look at Jones. That's with two S's .com. I think it's .com. I think his first name is Wayne Jones, but it's just been a true believer all the way through, and just has a great site with all kinds of information. Anyway, I'm going to get on with my day, and I'll let you get on with your day. Hopefully, this horrible ramble had something to offer. Thanks for stopping. Bye.